Well, good morning. Man, this is, what a day, right? Just being able to worship together, to be able to come together just as one church, and it's just been beautiful. It's just been beautiful. And so this morning is our fall kickoff, but it's also the launch of a brand new series called Pursuit. And one of the things I love about this kickoff in particular is that it's not a thing of like, how do we like somehow capture or create some sort of movement or momentum? It's like God is doing something, that God is stirring something in the life of this church that it's just beautiful. And so we're in this beautiful moment, and we're taking hold of it, and we're naming it, and we're leaning into this beautiful season in the life of Countryside Church. And so Countryside has always been a church that's been about new territory, right? It's always been a new territory kind of church. It's as if as I look and as I've known this church and as I've watched this church over the years, it's like God breathed life into this church 31 years ago. And at the same moment that he breathed life into this church, it's like he breathed into it this relentlessness in pursuit of mission, right? A relentlessness in saying, we will do everything that we can. We will continue to take new territory to make sure that people who have no connection with God or have not had a connection with God for a long time have a place to call home. Have a place where they can come and they can experience the goodness of God, the life-giving and life-changing reality of what Jesus Christ did for them. And so Countryside, for 31 years, has been a church that's been about new territory, saying, what do we have to do next, right? What's the next thing, and how do we continue to make sure that we are on mission? And it is so beautiful, right? So it's something that we get to celebrate today, and we look at, and we then imagine and prayerfully move forward as God calls us. So it shouldn't be a surprise. If Countryside has always been a new territory kind of church, it shouldn't be a surprise when God inspires us to continue to chase after new territory together. And it's an invitation not just for a church to chase after new territory, but for us individually and collectively to chase after the new territory that God has placed in front of us. So it's true for this church. Countryside has been in some really, really great places over the years. And there's still new territory to come. Right, Countryside has been some beautiful places, has been some great places, and yet there is still new territory to be taken. And for us, it's true for us as well. So you could say it this way, if you want to get what you've never had, you have to go where you've never been. Or if you want to get what you've never had, you got to go where you've never been. So we say new territory, new levels in our relationship with God, new things that God is teaching us and growing us and helping us to be more and more and more like the people he created us to be. So we haven't gotten that yet, right? If we're not there yet, then we may need to take some new territory. We might have to go to some places we've never been before. Which brings us to this new series, Pursuit. Calling this as a series is maybe an inadequate statement, right? It's not just a series. This is over the course of these weeks, we're gonna unpack a framework. And we're gonna unpack a language that we'll be using as we move forward together, as we say, what is it that we're chasing after? What is it that God has called us to be as people? And what has God called us to be as a people, right? As a local church. So what we talk about today will be part of how we move into the future together. What we talk about today and in the coming weeks will shape and will echo in countless ways in this church for years and years to come. Which might make us think, some of us might like pause for just a second and say, then it must be complicated. Right? If it's that big, if it's that kind of framework, if it's that kind of language, then where is it that we're heading? And it's going to be complicated. I better have my pen and paper ready because there's going to be a lot of components to this. We're going to have to figure this out as we put it on the map. Might seem like it's going to be complicated, but it's not. What if there were just a handful of things? What if there were just a handful of things that were key to everything? Maybe we could say it this way. What if we could chase 4 things that would change everything? Or if we could chase 4 things that would change everything. We'll get there. But one more piece to the foundation. When we talk about pursuit, just to make this very, very clear. When we talk about pursuit, and we talk about pursuit of God and pursuit of the life that God has created us for, that we're not talking about God distant from us or God moving away from us and we're running trying to catch up with him. That it's not that kind of pursuit. It's God in pursuit of us. Right? That's the story that we see woven throughout Scripture. It's the story that we see woven throughout the whole story that God is writing. So it's God in pursuit of us. and us in pursuit of the life that God has created us to live. You say, what does it look like for us to live God's best version of the life that he's created? To say, so with these areas of life, what does it look like for us to take hold of this in a way, to chase these things so that we get to God's best way of living? So then the question is, what keeps us from pursuing? Right? If it's like, well, this is what God's calling us to, and this is what God has made possible for us. This is what God breathed life into us, the kind of life he breathed into us to live. What is it that's keeping us from pursuing? If we did a thing where we started to call them out or name them, all the different reasons why maybe we're not pursuing. Why is it that we're not chasing after this? Why is it that we're not pursuing God's best for us? If we did that, we might find that when we start to make those statements or we start to name them or call them out, they'd fall into one of three categories, probably. One might be that we're chasing the wrong thing. Right? Somewhere along the line, we got a wrong picture of what life is supposed to be. And so we're chasing after that thing, but the picture it's unclear, it's the wrong picture. And so the more we chase after that, the more off track we're getting. It might be that we're chasing the wrong things. It might be that we're chasing the wrong picture. Second category, settling in the wrong place. Whether that's because we've drifted off course and we've gotten to a place in life where we think, well, there's just no forward from here. I don't know how I could possibly get back on track, so I might as well just put down stakes and put down roots and call this home because this is the best version of life that I can figure out how to make for myself. And we settle off course, or maybe we just settle too soon. We just don't go all the way with what God's calling us to go. Chasing the wrong thing, settling in the wrong place, or making it a solo mission. It's just about us, or it's just us on the journey, or it's just about us. As long as we're okay, then we're okay with that. And we start to name the things that keep us from chasing after the things that God has placed in front of us, the life that he's created us for. And it's probably going to have something to do, if we're not chasing it, probably have something to do with we're chasing the wrong thing, wrong priorities, wrong place, solo mission. And so here's the thing. It is so easy, right? There's three categories, but for all of us, there's countless ways that we can get off track. So the question is, what do we do with that? If it's so easy to get off track, how do we not miss new territory that God has placed in front of us? If God has created us for this place, if God has created us for this way of living, how do we make sure we don't miss out on that? Because it's so easy to get off track. There's good news, is that we are not the first ones to deal with new territory. Right? We're not the first ones to have to sort out this journey. We're not the first ones who have to figure out what God is calling us to and what God is calling us to lean into and what God is calling our lives to be marked by. God has been in the taking his people into new territory business all along. And so this morning, we're going to find our footing for this conversation in Exodus 23. And this moment, just as we're getting to this passage, this moment is the people of God have been in the wilderness. They have been anticipating a particular moment, this place that God has promised, that he has marked for them. And so they're on now the border of entering into this promised land. As they're on the border of entering into this, they're right as they're approaching this promised land, they're coming in, and God's giving some additional instructions. But you can imagine years of waiting, years of wondering, years of what will it be like? Will we ever get there? Is this really going to happen? We've been waiting for so long. All kinds of feelings, right? Deep feelings, big feelings that are unique to each and every person who's in this moment. But imagine what these years have been marked by. So as they approach this new territory, as they come to the border of this new territory, they're feeling these deep feelings. Some may be having a hard time believing that they're finally there, that they're just a few days or they're just a few steps away from the land that has been promised. Some may be feeling unworthy. They're looking at their journey. They're looking at the choices they've made along the way. And now as they're at the border between where they've been and this promised land that God has marked out for them, they're looking and they're saying, how could we possibly, with all that we have done and the mistakes that we have made and the way that we've gone about doing this, how could we be worthy to enter into this place that God has marked for us? And some of them may have been ready for action, right? They were ready to fight. So if there is promised land to be taken, if there is a space to be claimed, then we are ready for war. We will do whatever we can. We will fight for the promised land that God has marked for us. And so they're ready for action. And so you have all of these kinds of things. from I'm not worthy or I can't believe we're there to let's fight for this space that God has marked for us. And then it's into all of that and probably a whole lot more than that God begins to speak. And when God speaks, he reveals a process for moving into new territory that surprised everyone. Exodus 23, verse 20, God says this, "See, I am sending an angel ahead of you to guard you along the way and to bring you to the place that I have prepared." Which brings us with this verse to our first principle from this passage, and it's this: there is a promised land. Right? There is a promised land. We can get so caught up. Or have you noticed this? We can get so caught up with what's right in front of us that we can forget a big truth, that God has a best for us. Right? We look at our lives, we look at the choices that we're making, and the things that are right in front of us, and it's like we're surrounded by all these things, and in all of that, we can miss the big picture that God has a best for us, that God has a way of living for us, that God has designed us for a particular approach to life that's his best for us. There is a way of living that you were created for. There's a way of living. This is what Jesus had in mind when he walked this earth, when he led people, when he suffered and bled and died for us. It was for a particular way of living life. When God formed mankind out of the dust, when he breathed life into all of us, he had a way of living in mind. And so we may not be like the people of God in Exodus 23, moving into some sort of geographical new territory. But the things that God has placed in front of us, the moments that he's placed in front of us, the new territory that God has placed in front of us, the new territory that he's taking us into matters. Verse 27 of Exodus 23, God continues. He says, "I will send my terror ahead of you and throw into confusion every nation you encounter. I will make all your enemies turn their backs and run." Right? So those who are ready to fight are probably like, man, I thought we were going to get to fight. I thought there was going to be more action involved. God's going to take care of all of this. Those who have been wondering, those who are afraid, they're fearful, God is responding to all of these kinds of things. And he says, "I will send the hornet ahead of you to drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, all out of your way." But then this, verse 29, "But I will not drive them out in a single year, because the land would become desolate and the wild animals too numerous for you." It says, "Little by little, I will drive them out before you until you have increased enough to take possession of the land." Isn't that surprising? When we think about new territory, when we think about the process that we might think we have to go through, what God says and what God promises in that kind of moment leads us to principle 2, which is this, that there is grace and there is pace in taking new territory. There is grace and there is pace in taking new territory. That all of it is a work of God, right? All of it is God's grace poured out in our lives. All of it is God's grace looking at us and looking at the new territory that he's placed in front of us. And little by little, right, as we can handle it, God continues to go. And he pushes. And he pushes, and he says, "Stay in step with me. Let's continue to move forward together." There is grace and there is pace in taking new territory. And this is true of the people of God, right? The big picture, the big story people of God. And it's true of the people, right? The you and me people of God. That God brings us into new territory with grace. God brings us into new territory with a pace that's a blessing for us and a blessing for the new territory that he's calling us into, that he's inviting us into. Because he says in Exodus 23, if I would give you the whole thing now, if we would just like throw the whole thing open, it would actually not be a blessing at all, not for you and not for the land. It would be a curse for you and a curse for the land, because it would become a desolate place. And wild animals would take it over. And so when you are ready, at just the right time, God with his grace and with a pace that allows us to stay in step with him, he moves us little by little, year by year, into what he's called us to be. God says, little by little, as you can handle it, I'll give it to you. And so that means our part is to be ready, to lean into what God is doing in our lives, to make sure we are ready as God moves, to leave no territory untaken. If God has moved, and if God has moved the borders of the land that he's called us to occupy, then we do everything we can to make sure we are ready. We're right there with God, not leaving anything desolate or where wild animals can take over. Living our lives in pursuit of what God has for us. Which brings us to principle 3. Pursuit is normal Christianity. Pursuit is normal Christianity. Some of us, we hear these things and we think like new territory or these next steps in our journey. And we think about this God's way of living and we think, boy, that feels like something that someone who's like really super at their relationship with God, this like extra kind of Christian could pull off. And we let ourselves off the hook. But what we see as we trace the story that God is writing, as we trace the story of the people of God and individual stories of people of God, we see that the pursuit, that the most natural response to what God did for us through Jesus Christ, what God has done as he marks out more and more in new territory for us, is to stay in step with him, to keep chasing after him. And so pursuit is not some extra kind of thing. Pursuit is normal Christianity. It is the most natural and normal thing to do, to say, if God is moving, and because Jesus has done for me that what only he could do, that he has poured out grace in my life, and God is on the move, then I just want to be in step with him. It is normal. The normal response would be to say, then I'm going to chase after him, right? Responding, not that we're trying to create things, but to respond to what God is doing. It's what we're created for. It's what Jesus died to make possible for us. But here's the good news. You don't have to just take my word for it. When we look at people who have encountered Jesus, people who either walked with Jesus or had this radical, life-changing encounter with God, we see these themes that start to emerge and what they describe as the way forward, as they now understand what life should look like. So Peter, right, the Apostle Peter, a disciple of Jesus who then would go on to lead the church as Jesus sent the church out on mission. Peter, who walked with Jesus during the entirety of Jesus' earthly ministry, writes in 2 Peter 1, it says this, it says, grace and peace be yours in abundance through the knowledge of God and of Jesus our Lord. He says, his divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. It says, through these, he has given us his very great and precious promises so that through them you may participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption in the world caused by evil desires. He says, and for this reason, right, because God has done this, he says, for this reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness, knowledge, and to knowledge, self-control, and to self-control, perseverance, and to perseverance, godliness, and to godliness, mutual affection, and to mutual affection, love. Keep going, right? Keep going. If God has done, and because God did through Jesus Christ, if God has made the way for you, why would you not go all the way with this journey? Why would you not take it to the fullest extent of what Jesus made possible? He says, for if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. Right? Peter's saying, look, it is normal. The most normal response to what Jesus has done is to chase after him, to become more and more and more like him. Why would we not pursue him? He says, but whoever does not have them is nearsighted and blind, forgetting that they have been cleansed from their past sins. The pursuit is normal Christianity. Paul, who had a radical, life-changing encounter with God, the one that opened his eyes and let him see life in a whole new way, writes this to the Philippian church. He says, not that I've already obtained all of this, as he's talking about these marks of maturity. He says, not that I've already obtained all of this, or have already arrived at my goal, but I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. He says, brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself yet to have taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what's ahead, I press on towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. Paul says the most natural response to what Jesus has done for me, the most natural response to God's grace in my life is to chase after him, to let go of whatever is holding me back, and to take hold of what's in front of me, the thing that Jesus Christ made possible for me. And it's expressed beautifully within the life of the church in the first few decades of the life of the church. There was a sermon that was written, and it was written, and then it was copied down, and it was distributed among the churches throughout the region. And And these churches would gather in homes and they would read this sermon to each other. And as the sermon was read, people's lives were transformed. People saw God differently. They saw themselves differently. Where it was read, it shaped the lives of those who heard it. This sermon we know as the book of Hebrews in our Bible. And in that sermon, the church takes hold of this statement. Therefore, chapter 12 of Hebrews, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, there are so many who have gone before us, who have shown us the way forward. So therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. This passage we hung right inside the door in the church offices. So as a team, as we come into our offices, the first thing we see when we walk in the door every day is a portion of this passage. So we remember the mission. So we remember what it is that we're called to run. Not just haphazardly, not just like busy kind of action, but to run with perseverance, to trust the race that's marked out for us with our eyes fixed on Jesus every step of the way. When I was in college, one of my summer jobs was maintenance at a golf course. And some of you have been on golf courses, maybe many of you have been on golf courses, but one of the things that's so defining about a golf course is like the mowing patterns, right? It's like you think like sometimes we'll mow our lawn and we look back and we're like, this looks so good it could be a golf course, right? Like I feel pretty proud of like that. I cut it a diagonal this time and it just looks, it's like a golf course. That looks sweet. Well, when you're working maintenance at a golf course, there's a lot of peer pressure to make sure you get those lines right. And so the training process, as we would begin to do our mowing and begin to do our work, said, look, to get this right, that first cut really matters, right? To get that line right, because then you can basically follow that line to fill in the rest of the space that you're mowing. And so my boss at the time was training me. He said, let me teach you the secret. So you get on this mower, and so if we know that we're cutting, today is a day that we're cutting all this particular diagonal cut. So what you do is you get on that mower and you get lined up. So and then you pick a point like on the horizon, like find a tree or find like some little like interesting little bush or something, and you look at that and you just keep staring at that thing, and then you just go. And you don't take your eyes off of that thing. You just keep going and going and going. And it's amazing how just doing that thing, if you take your eyes off, you're gonna be in trouble because you're gonna start trying to guess where the terrain is taking you. He says, if you never take your eyes off of whatever that point is on the horizon, that first line will be straight every time. And what's amazing is you go and like the terrain and the ups and the downs and the things that come our way, the things that we would have to navigate as we were mowing is that first line, something about fixing our eyes on that thing. Regardless of whatever terrain that mower may have had to go over, that line would be perfectly straight. We take our eyes off and then we have to try and guess how to get ourselves back on track. We're going to spend our time trying to fix that first cut. But there's something powerful about saying, I'm going to live my life with my eyes fixed on what I'm trying to get to, the thing that's most important. I'm going to let that be the thing that shapes everything else, ups and downs and changes in terrain and whatever else may come. My eyes fixed on Jesus. And so it's with all of this in view, these principles for the journey, these principles for the way that we live our lives, the way that God leads us and takes us into new territory, that we come to our 4 pursuits. Right? We started our time together this morning with a question: what if we could chase 4 things that would change everything? Jesus did it in 2. Right? There's 2 statements that Jesus made, 2 sets of instructions that Jesus made that we call great. There's the Great Commission, right? Go and make disciples. Go to the very ends of the earth, make disciples of all nations. And the Great Commandment, where he says, so love your God, right? Love God. And love your neighbor like you love yourself. So Jesus makes it in 2 statements, these 2 great statements. So our 4 pursuits are built on these 2 statements. And it's an ecosystem approach. I'll just say it this way, it'll make sense as we tease this out. We're not talking about a path. As we talk about this pursuit, we're not saying these 4 things that are in some sort of sequential order where we look and we say, once we have adequately done step 1, then we get to move on to step 2, and then we have the opportunity to move into step 3, and then we move into step 4. These are not sequential. These are 4 pursuits that maybe for some of us, one might be more natural than the others, and so we're sort of ahead of where we are on other places, but naming these things and saying, what do we need to do to grow? Where they can be diagnostic and conversations over coffee, where we can say, look, life just doesn't seem to be going quite like I had hoped it would go. So we look and we say, so is it this? Maybe it's this. Maybe it's this. Let's talk about this. Because each pursuit is a move from trying our best, right? We know where our best takes us. It's right where we are right now. To pursuing God's best, which for most of us is probably going to take us into some new territory in some way. And so as we walk through, I just ask you, as we walk through these 4 pursuits, and we're going to be unpacking these over the next few weeks, but as we move through these 4 pursuits, begin to ask God the question. This is this simple question: God, what's my new territory? God, what is it that you're stirring in me? Where is it that I need to grow? What is it that you're wanting to stir in me and take me into? And remember, there is a promised land, right? There is a God's best for us. There is grace and there is pace in taking new territory. So we might hear one of these and we're like, boy, I am a long way off on that. Grace and pace, year by year, by year by year. Let God walk with us and lead us in this process. And that the pursuit to move into maturity in these areas, to move into the fullness of life in these areas, is normal Christianity. And so pursuit 1 is the journey together. This is pursuing God's best in our relationships. Or this is pursuing God's best in our approach to relationships, saying we do not want to journey alone. We recognize that who is around us shapes our journey in so many kinds of ways. And so we're consistent in approaching community. We say, look, we're gonna be consistent in gathering for worship, that it matters that we come together in this place. It matters that we don't just leave right away as service is over. We connect with each other and we connect with others on the way out the door. That we're part of a small group because we recognize that the journey matters, but the journey together matters. So it's important that we're not trying to make this journey on our own. Maybe for some of us, it's you know what, the process, the journey of journeying together might lead to membership in this local church, to say, I'm going to go all in. I want to be part of this. I'm going to commit myself to this place, and it might not always be perfect along the way, but in a restless culture, I'm going to find my place. And even though it's not always going to be perfect, and I'm not always going to agree with everything that happens, I'm going to do something radically countercultural. I'm going to choose to settle in this place. I'm going to walk with these people, and they're going to walk with me. And we look and we say, so wherever someone is, the commitment to journey together says we're going to meet people where they are, and we're going to walk with them to where God has created them to be. That's pursuit 1. Pursuit 2, join the cause. That's us saying we're going to pursue God's best in the way we use our resources. Whether that's talents that we have, or maybe for some of us, we look at different opportunities within the life of the church where we're saying, look, we could use some help. And we say, look, I might not have talent, but I have availability, right? So I could make myself available to this. I want to be part of this. I'm going to find myself pursuing the cause. I'm going to join the cause, pursuing God's best in our use of our resources, finding a team, finding some place to serve within the life of this church and serve. Find a place to work. So our various team leaders, they're all committed to this process of, we will train you. We will even let you off the hook if it becomes clear that this is not the right place for you. If you're saying, I just wanted to try it out. But find a place to serve, find a way to get involved and to involve ourselves in the life of the church. And for some of us, it's a question of resources. Say, so what God has placed in my hands, I'm going to trust him with what he's placed in my hands. And so I'm going to steward, I'm going to let him put to use what he's placed in my hands. And be open-handed about the things that God has placed in my life. And so look, and so for some of us, this join the cause, it might be that it's maybe time to begin to, or to move forward, or to step into the fullness of what God is calling us to do in the way that we give and invest in our local church. Journey together. Join the cause. Grow deeper. This is pursuing God's best in who we're becoming. Saying there is a future. Right, there is something. We are all becoming something. This is an opportunity for us to say, we want to become who God has created us to be. And so for some of us, it's a moment where we maybe need to accept the offer of salvation that Jesus has made possible for us. Or maybe it's a step into baptism, or maybe it's stepping into some sort of consistency with private discipline, saying, look, I want to grow deeper. And I want to lean into what God is teaching. I want to understand God's voice. I want to understand God's word. And so I'm going to spend time in prayer. I'm going to spend time reading God's word. Maybe it's little pieces at a time, right? The grace and the pace of the pursuit. But we move forward, that every day we're becoming something. Let's become who God has created us to be. And live on mission, which is pursuing God's best in the purpose of our lives. To say that what we are here for, that what God has done in us inevitably will lead us to being on mission with him, that God has done for us so that we can be part of how God does for others. And so this means that we serve others, that join the cause is more what happens within the life of the church, where live on mission is like everything that happens as we go from this place. So we say, what does it look like to pay attention to my neighbors in a different kind of way? What does it look like for me to be intentional in my conversations that I have with my friends and my coworkers? What does it look like for me to get over myself and serve other people as God is asking me to do that? To participate in outreach events as they happen within the life of the church? To personal evangelism, to tell our story, to service projects, to missions trips, to say we just want to live our lives in a different kind of way, to say God has a purpose for my life and it's not just about me. And so, two key habits. One, pay attention to what you're chasing. Pay attention to what you're chasing. Make sure you're chasing the right thing. And two, stay in step with God. That God is in the business, has always been in the business of taking his people into new territory. And there is grace and there is pace, but there's also always progress. There's a relentlessness in what God is doing, this relentlessness and God marking new territory and inviting us to stay in step with him as he's leading us into the place that he's called us to be. So don't settle too soon. Make sure you're chasing the right thing, but stay in step with God. And so as we move forward, there's 4 commitments that we'll make as a church. One, that we will make the picture clear. This is what we're called to, right? So we're not chasing the wrong picture, that we're not chasing some kind of fuzzy thing or chasing after something that's not clear. We will make the bullseye for our lives clear. That we will make the pursuit normal. Right? That this is who we are and we're chasing after this. It is normal for us to be pursuing these things. Not that it's like normal to be like fully at 11 in every one of these categories, but to say the pursuit, the conversations, the step-by-step reality of God leading us will be the normal way of operating. That we will create intentional environments. It's happening in the kids' space. If you go up there and check that out, this is what Becky's working on, making sure that space is intentional. It's happening in lots of other environments too. And we will help each other. A year and a half ago, we put in the Next Steps Hub, when we opened up that space, we put 3 statements. You matter. Your next step matters. And we're here to help. See, there is no such thing as a solo mission. There's no such thing as a person who has to journey alone. We will help. We are here to help. And so as we move forward, as we talk about this, I want to take just a moment. I'm going to invite James and Becky to join me out here to talk about one new key environment. So we look at these pursuits and we step back, and as a team we started to look and we say, so what does it look like? What does it look like for us to create an environment that is so intentionally crafted for pursuit? Where it's a space that's designed specifically for the journey together, for joining the cause, to grow deeper and to live on mission. What does it look like for us to craft an environment like that? And so we have a space called the War Room that we use. And as a team, we got together. I think James and I were talking, and Becky was kind of dreaming this thing. And there's a whiteboard, and we start processing. And we're going to talk about some new thing, this new environment, this intentionally crafted environment for pursuit. And it's called Table Time. So James, would you take just a moment and talk about what's going to be happening on Thursday nights, so a 10-week block for an hour and a half, so 6 to 7:30, Thursday nights here in the gym. James, what's going to be happening?
When you come in on those Thursday nights, we're going to have a great time. We're going to have tables around the room, round tables. And we're just going to invite you to come in, and if you are coming with your spouse, if you're coming alone, doesn't matter. Just find a table, sit down, and bring your notes from the previous Sunday. Because those 4 questions that are on your note sheet, those will be key. Now, youth are invited too. We want the whole family to come. But those 4 questions, you come with that first question, which is, what 2 words do you remember from the message? And I would imagine that maybe you're already thinking like, oh, I remember the 2 words that I'm already thinking from Pastor Nate's message. Maybe it's pursuit and journey or something like that. But you come and you bring that sheet, and then you guys just discuss it at those round tables. It's a very easy, very simple way to get into community. This goes in conjunction with our already wonderful small groups that we've got going on multiple nights and multiple days during the week. And so we invite you to take this next step. If you are not a part of any sort of community, we invite you to do this all 4 of your pursuits will be on full display for this. And so we invite you to do that. Now, there is one thing that I am leaving out, which is really awesome. You said it's 6 to 7:30, and when you say 6 to 7:30, I'm thinking one thing: where's my dinner, right? That's what goes through my head. So we just decided, you know what? We're gonna feed you too. So you come in, we feed you, we feed your entire family. It's multi-generational, which is really a great, exciting part, because Becky, multi-generational means we've got a place for kids too. So tell us more about that.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing your kids with us. We love having them. We love being with them. And several years ago, we said an hour is not enough. And we started praying about how can we touch base with kids midweek? What can we do midweek for kids? And we knew food was involved several years ago. And so when we were talking about this as a team, it was just really exciting to see the vision for the entire church to come together. So bring your kids, bring them upstairs. We are going to feed them. We are going to help them grow, teach them something great, and entertain them with all kinds of good things. And we can't wait. We can't wait for this additional time with them. I want to have dinner with your kids, so it's exciting.
Man.
Yeah. We matched, by the way, on purpose. Not really on purpose, but somebody pointed it out, and they were like, look at you guys. We're like, awesome. Yeah, Thursday night, it'll start September 19th, 6 to 7:30. We are putting an end time on there because your weeknights are important. You know, we know that everybody's got to get situated for bedtimes, too. So very excited.
This is so good.
Yeah.
Food. Kids are going to have an intentional time together around the tables. The process for preparation is literally like listen to the message, whether it's a watch it on YouTube or live or online or whatever that looks like. Process a few questions and then just come ready to be in community. I know for our family, this is one of the things that I'm so excited about is it's going to be part of our family's rhythm. And so for me to just have time with this church who I love so very much.
Yep.
I'm just very much looking forward to all of that together. So Thursday, starting September 19th for 10 weeks, basically running to Thanksgiving or the week before Thanksgiving. And right here in the gym or upstairs for our kids. And it's going to be just an incredible time. So we are so excited for table time. Take us up on it. It's going to be worth it. It's going to make a huge, huge difference in your lives and in the life of this church as we move forward.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
And one more piece as we talk about the table. It seems so fitting for us as we begin this fall, as we do this fall kickoff, just to address one more table. It's the table that Jesus Christ invited us to. Right, to pause and to remember what Jesus has done for us. To join the church across time and across the world in celebrating and remembering the work that Jesus did for us on the cross. So Pastor Jamie, I'm going to ask that you lead us through a time of communion.